Ladies and gentlemen, hello again. Welcome to another Reflected Reality Simulations video. My name is Graham, this is X-Plane 11 and the Rotate MD-80. It's part 3 of the video series. Today we're going to look at an ILS approach towards Olbia in Sardinia, but rather than land off the approach, we're going to fly the missed approach procedure. It's important to know how to fly the missed approach or the go-around before we start looking at more complicated non-precision approaches. Reason being that if your approach doesn't work out the way you expected, it's a far safer prospect to fly a missed approach than it is to try and land off an unstable approach. It's quite a straightforward procedure in the MD-80. So the sim's paused at the moment. We're just on a final vector towards the final approach track. And what we'll do is we'll have a look at the approach briefing. There's a link in the video description to the speed cards that I've produced for this aircraft, and there's a little guide in there as well. And that gives you the basics of how to do a single pilot briefing. What we're interested in doing is comparing what's on the chart to what's on the computer on the aircraft. These are the state charts here produced by, in this case, one of the Italian aviation agencies. These are the charts that people like Jeppesen use to build the information in their charts. This is the definitive source of the information. It's what the state publishes. There's some little bits of information that are missing from the chart that you would have on an operational chart, such as the runway visual range. But to be honest, that doesn't matter for flight sims. So the effective brief is we're looking at an ILS approach to runway 23 at Lima, India, Echo Oscar. It says the same details up here, so we've got a good chart. The MSA, the minimum safe or minimum sector altitude here, 6,000 will cover us for the whole thing. We're going to use a decision altitude today, so we're going to use it on the Barrow scale here. And Category C aircraft, 390 seems sensible. It should do a 5% gradient at the weights we've got, so 390. If you're doing Cat 2 or lower, you'd use the decision height, and I think some companies would use the decision height to mark the height as well, but I'm not going to bother with that today. Runway visual range, as I said, it's not on the charts. We need 550 meters for a Cat 1 ILS, typically, and it's clear blue sky, so that's not a factor today. The approach aids is what we're really interested in. There's the localizer there, 111.3. You see the Italian charts here show you the glide path frequency and the DME channel. That's what the ILS radio would select itself to tune the glide slope. So 111.3 is what we need on the VHF navs. There we go. And 234 is the inbound track. Again, 234 there versus 234 and 234. What we're really interested in, though, is the missed approach. See, the missed approach has us flying from the runway towards the SME beacon, making a left turn out to intercept radial 099 towards EKROB, pick up a holding left on the 279 inbound. So it'd be a procedure entry like this. There's a 185 knot speed limit in the turn, 210 at the hold, and a minimum holding altitude of 5,000. So let's have a look at what we've got on the legs page. There's the runway. So on the next page, we've got the SME, left turn to intercept the 098, 1 degree out, that's fine. Out towards EKROB to hold at EKROB. It's got the speeds and the altitudes on the FMC as well. That means we can use the nav track on the aircraft to make the missed approach a little bit easier. What we need to check is what config we're going to use to fly this missed approach. The limiting speed is 185. Let's have a look at the speed cards. So we've got an aircraft that is, well, just under 56 tons, so we'll use the 56 tons. Our VREF is 131 on the cards, plus 5 knots takes us to 136. Remember, there's a little 1 knot error here on these cards. Doesn't really matter, I'm using what the aircraft has here. The go-around config is flap 15. So we're going to retract to flap 15. That gives a manoeuvring speed of 147 and a V2 speed of 136. So anything above 147, we can use the full bank on the aircraft. But at 185, we can clean up to slats only config, so 0 with the slats extended, but we can't go fully clean because 185 is obviously less than the clean speed. And that's the same at 210 as well. So we'll fly the initial missed approach at flat 15, once we're accelerating up to 185, and then retracting the flaps only. Should be quite straightforward. So we're just positioning towards the final fix here, and then we'll make the turn, pick up the ILS. Let's take the pause off and see what happens. Now there's a gotcha that you've got to be careful. If you're using vectors to shorten the final approach, if we want to use nav in the go around, use nav track, we've got to make sure we're getting a sensible nav track out of the aircraft. At the moment, the target waypoint is Millis, and that's not going to work because we're probably not going to actually get to Millis. It's actually close enough in this case that it would actually work, but I don't want to leave it to chance. What I'm going to do is go direct to the India Oscar Lima 11, and that's going to make sure that even though I'm still flying in heading, I've got the correct 2 waypoint on the computer. I'm going to start slowing down as well. I'm going to come back to 180 and select flap 11. That's just to get me a bit of drag. I could go all the way down to 175 odd knots with just the slats, but I want a bit more drag today. And on the heading, I'll be cleared for the approach, so I'll click ILS, verify we've got ILS, still in heading, invert speed. I can reduce the vertical speed now, just to try and do a continuous descent approach. So this is all going to be flown with the autopilot. It's 1.40 of the Rotate Sim model. There's a little bug been introduced that when you take the autopilot out, the flight directors stop providing useful guidance on this version. I believe they're going to fix it. I have reported the bug to Rotate, and there should be a patch coming out shortly for it. There's a number of other little things, but it's not really that bad. It works quite well, this version of the sim. So expecting it to capture the localizer anytime soon. There you go, it's gone on to look track. It's turning towards the runway. And once we've done that, I'll select the heading to the runway heading as well. The reason is as we fly the missed approach, initially it goes into heading hold. So we want to make sure that's a sensible heading we've got on the flight controls here. So momentarily it will capture 3,000 feet, and then it should pick up the glide slope. So we've got alt hold, still got the ILS, and as soon as the glide slope comes down you'll see lock track and glide slope. There we go, lock and glide slope track. Once we've got lock and glide slope, I'm going to set the missed approach alt to 5,000. I'm not going to arm it because that I think breaks out of the approach. We'll do that as we fly the missed approach. Coming down through 2,500 feet, I'm going to select flap 15, put the gear down, and I'll wind the speed back to 150. Just trying to keep the speed simple. The manoeuvring speed at this weight is actually 148, but 150 is a nice round number. I've got gear down in 3 greens, so I can arm the speed brakes. And I'm checking obviously that the waypoint distance is counting down. That's one of the good ways to check that I've got the correct waypoint sequencing. What I'll do is start winding the speed back to the final approach speed. It was what, can't remember, 136. There we go. That's flaps 28 selected and flaps 40. Flap 40 will arm the auto brake. I'll just bring up the missed approach chart so we've got that there as we fly the procedure as well. It's the initial part here we're interested in. So the missed approach is really straightforward within this aircraft. I'm going to push the go around buttons here, the TOGA buttons here on the back of the thrust levers, and simultaneously we'll select flap 15. We're going to monitor for a positive rate of climb, so look for the altimeter increasing and the VSI increasing. Once we've got that positive climb, we'll put the gear away, and then we'll arm the approach alt here to give it something to accelerate or to climb up to. The aircraft's going to maintain the pitch attitude to give us the correct missed approach speed, just as it does on the takeoff. You'll see that when we use the TOGA function on the aircraft at the moment, it will lower the nose ever so slightly. I think that's just a quirk of how the rotate sim model is implemented. It'll lose about 100 feet from the point you click the go around button. So Cat 1 minima, certainly never below 200 feet above the field. It's plenty adequate to do that. If you're any lower than that, you'd be flying it manually anyway, and a manual missed approach is very much the same thing. You've just got to think about how you're going to put the automatics back in if you do the missed approach manually. We've got about 5.5 tons of fuel in the tank, so that should be sufficient. So minimum is 390. That's 100 above. And minimums go around flap 15. Looking at the VSI and the altimeter, both are going up, positive climb, gear up, arm out. So we've got flap 15 selected, heading hold, 5000, EPA go around. I'll push nav up here, it goes back into nav track, and you see it's maintaining a sensible speed on the climb out here. It's in EPA go around at the moment. What I'm going to do is, once we pass 1500 feet, just like the takeoff, put it into EPA climb. It reduces the thrust ever so slightly. And because I'm only going up to 185 rather than the 250, I'll put 185 ready in the speed window. It's still flying a pitch attitude to maintain the go around. You see the FMA column here is blank, but I would expect it to be very similar to the takeoff mode. There it's rolling into the turn. And it's just around about the flap 15 manoeuvring speed, so it will reduce the bank angle ever so slightly. At 3000 feet, what I'll do is reduce to 1500 feet per minute and make sure I go into speed select, that stops it accelerating. So rather than being in an EPA mode, it's targeting a speed. Fundamentally, it's the same thrust rating though. So less than 185 around the corner, we're complying with that, and we're going out to capture the radial 099. What I'll do is I'll put 099 in the window, just in case it doesn't capture, I can do that in heading. Looking at the speed card again. So my flap in speed, if I was wings level or limited manoeuvring, would be 156. I could leave it to 173. Either way, it doesn't matter. We're just approaching 173 just now, so flap 0. Just verify we've got the alt there. It's coming back to hold 185 with nav track invert speed. The speed restriction only applies in the turn, so I'll wind it up to 210 knots. It's all about keeping it as simple as possible, so maintaining that flap 15 config, manoeuvring at an appropriate speed for flap 15 is the easiest way to fly the missed approach. Obviously that was going up to 5000 feet. Some airfields have got a really low missed approach, around about 2000 feet, and that can be quite exciting. It can all happen really quite quickly. Especially if you've gone around from a higher altitude. If you've gone around from 1000 feet and you only get a platform for the missed approach of 2000 feet, then that can get quite a high workload. You see it's tracking outbound quite happily here. I'm not going to go any faster than 210 knots, so I'll consider that to be the config achieved. I'll put the speed brakes away and I'll reset make sure the auto brake is reset for the next approach. We'd also consider the hydraulics and the igniters. So this aircraft's very good at flying the hold. You can see it's got EKROB here. It's going to fly out, do the entry, and then pick up the hold. It's very uncommon to fly a missed approach due to weather. If you're flying into an airfield that's really quite foggy and you need to fly a Cat 3 approach or a Cat 2 approach, you wouldn't make the approach if the aircraft wasn't able to land in the conditions. There's something called the approach ban, and that prevents you from going below 1,000 feet of the outer marker if the reported viz is less than what the aircraft needs to land. You would use the best landing capability you've got on the day, or the landing capability, to make the approach work. So if it's Cat 3 conditions, you would never make a Cat 1 approach. Obviously the weather can change in the final stages. You know, you could be flying a Cat 1 approach and a sudden fog bank rolls in. That would be a possible reason for a weather related missed approach. But more often than not, it's something completely unrelated to your aircraft. There could be somebody on the runway with a pending takeoff clearance. They have an issue, perhaps somebody unfastens a seatbelt and stands up so the flight crew can't continue the takeoff. Maybe they have advanced thrust on the runway and there's a caption comes up on the aircraft and they hold position instead of taking off. That way, you don't have a clear runway, you can't land. So your missed approach from minimums is really the quite rare scenario. It's more often you'll get it a lot earlier on in the approach procedure. Flying out here would be considering the fuel, whether or not we want to hang around, have another approach into Olbia, or whether or not we use our alternate fuel instead. Probably get enough fuel to get the alternate still. We'd also be speaking to our passengers, make sure they're reassured because they thought they were going to be landing 2 minutes ago and then we've put a full power climb on. There's going to be some slightly concerned people back there. Tell the cabin crew what to expect when we're going to make the next approach, if we are making another approach into the destination. And then get the aircraft set up for the next approach. There's a little gotcha on this aircraft when you're doing that. Looking at the legs page now, all it has is EKROB and the hold at EKROB. On an Airbus, it would automatically put the approach you'd just flown, it would put that back in for you, so you could fly it again. On this aircraft, we've got to load it. Now, I'll go into departures arrivals, and let's say there was something wrong with the ILS now, and I want to fly an RNAV approach instead. There's the RNAV Zulu onto runway 23. I'll select it, but I won't execute it. Let's go back to the legs page, and you'll see the next target is Millis, and then the hold for the RNAV is at the SME beacon, that's overhead the field. It doesn't have EKROB on there at all. If I was to execute that, there's no way at all it would pick up the hold. So I can use this in a kind of temporary flight plan manner. I can put it into plan, I can check the coding on the missed approach, we can step through it, just like we would on the ground. But I cannot execute it, otherwise it won't fly the hold that I'm currently set up for. So let's just erase that and go back to the previous plan. Make sure it enters the hold now. There we go, so it's turning, and obviously the hold is this direction. So the aircraft's got to turn around. It's going to do that by doing this kind of offset entry. So in the next few videos we'll look at flying either a VOR or an RNAV approach, maybe even an NDB approach. They're all flown slightly, quite similarly in the MD-80. And then moving on from that, we'll have a look and see if we can do a VNAV, LNAV style of approach. I don't think the MD-80 in reality would be capable of doing that, but we'll have a go in the sim, see if we can make it do it, just for simplicity's sake. I hope you found the video informative. If you get any questions or anything else you'd like to know about the MD-80, please let me know in the comment section. There's a link to the speed cards there. And people have been asking about the procedure notes I've been implementing for the MD-80. One of the things I like to include in the procedures is the approximate fuel burn, just a rough fuel outline. The 1.31 version of the MD-80 had very high fuel burn in X-Plane 10 and very low fuel burn in X-Plane 11, and the developers have told me they have corrected it in the 1.4 version we're looking at just now. The problem is with this other bugs it's got with the flight directors and the autopilot engagement, there's a possibility there'll be a patch release in the not too distant future. So I'm kind of holding off on those procedure notes until I'm happy that the version I'm writing them for is going to be around for a while, if that makes sense. So as soon as that patch has happened, we'll have a look at finishing the procedure notes. Thanks very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.